Hi, Ben Tilly from Left Tail Risk Advisors. In this video, I'm going to go through some issues that deal with the intersection of life insurance and family law. So I think this video could be useful for people who are, unfortunately, if they're going through a divorce or if they're planning another marriage and are considering a prenup. So starting with the divorce scenario, it's common in a divorce situation, if there's children involved, that there's going to be a child support obligation and potentially a spousal support obligation. And one of the things that you see is that most divorce attorneys are very cognizant of the risk of um, the spouse that has the obligation to pay. A risk is if they pass away unexpectedly, then the support obligations will not get paid, and that could really negatively impact the children involved, and it could negatively impact the surviving ex-spouse. And so something that you'll see is that there'll be a requirement in the divorce agreement or the divorce settlement for the spouse that's carrying the support obligation to have life insurance on themselves and have the ex-spouse as a beneficiary, either to care for the children or to replace spousal support. Most of the time, those are temporary support obligations, and so most of the time, term life insurance is the appropriate insurance vehicle to have for that. Sometimes with spousal support, that could be for a lifetime. So it's possible that in that scenario, a permanent life insurance policy may be more appropriate. You want to see it's best to have a life insurance professional involved in this process to make sure that the appropriate policy is in place. You have the appropriate owners, the appropriate beneficiaries. Another thing that's important that sometimes I think is looked over if the attorneys aren't focused on this is there should be an enforcement mechanism and a monitoring mechanism that if you're going to have these policies in place, they're only as good as those policies being enforced. So you want to have some language in the agreement that allows the spouse that's relying on the policy being in place to see proof that the policy is still in place and to have some enforcement mechanism to force the other party to keep the insurance in place or to get new insurance if somehow it lapses. So I think that's important to look at with the divorce situation. I think another very overlooked situation with divorce and with child support and spousal support settlements is it's common to see life insurance addressed and used as a risk transfer tool in these scenarios. What is less common, but equally or probably more important to have, is disability insurance. And the reason for that is just the likelihood that somebody, particularly if they're younger, the likelihood that they're going to become disabled during the time for which they have these obligations, if they're temporary, is much greater than the likelihood that they're going to pass away. So you want to have something in place to ensure that there's still going to be a flow of income to cover these support obligations in the event of a disability. So I think disability coverage should be a regular feature of risk planning for this, just in the same way life insurance is. And I think the same issues come up with in terms of having a professional on board to make sure that everything is structured properly with the disability insurance policy, and also to make sure that there's an enforcement feature should the disability policy be dropped, or to make sure that the disability policy is still in place. So I think these are very important tools. And if you're going through a divorce right now, you'd want to go through this with your divorce attorney to make sure that these pieces are in place. And if need be, a life insurance professional is brought in to help with this part of the process. On the prenup side, when people are getting married, and this is important too, and I think it comes up mostly in the scenario of second marriages. If there's, let's say there's children involved, one party has a lot of assets or a lot more assets than the other. Um, you want to have planning in place for the most part. Most people that are going into a second marriage and they have children from the first marriage, they're going to want to make sure that those children are taken care of as part of the estate planning. And this could create a sense of vulnerability for the spouse that they're marrying, because if the bulk of their estate is going to go to care for their children in the event of their death, that could leave the second spouse feeling vulnerable. And a simple and elegant way that some people address that, and I think it makes a lot of sense, is that's a scenario where you would use permanent life insurance, where you could have it that the bulk of the existing assets are going to go to care for the children, but there's a policy to ensure that the new spouse is taken care of in the event of death. It's also, in addition to be used for that purpose, it could also be used as a um, premeditated asset split in the event of a divorce. So part of prenup planning is to determine what happens to assets in the event of a split. And if you're using a permanent cash value life insurance policy, ownership of the cash value or control of the cash value may be given to the less moneyed spouse as a way to not only insure them and give them comfort in the event that the more money spouse passes away, that there's assets that are going to go to care for their support, but also in the event that the marriage terminates before death, that the cash value in the insurance policy is an asset that they're going to have so that they're not left vulnerable in that situation either. So life insurance can be a simple and elegant tool to address that really just division of care and the division of assets. If somebody is entering into a second marriage where they have to balance care for their first family with care for a new spouse or second family. So, as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk further about the topic. And I encourage you to subscribe for future videos. Thank you for watching.